My dear listeners, this is an original sci-fi story I wrote for you. If you'd like to support me, just subscribe to the channel. It really helps the growth. The colony ship's life support failed at 0300 hours. Dr. Kira Osman was running diagnostics in the botany lab when the oxygen alarms shrieked through every corridor. Hull breach, Sector 7. The ship's AI announced. Emergency bulkheads sealing. Affected areas transitioning to emergency reserves. Repair crews respond. Kira grabbed her breather mask and headed for the airlock. The breach was in the residential wing. She'd trained for this limited oxygen 18 minutes until the backup generators kicked in. Manageable. Then she heard the roar. Anyone, please. The translator made the Vraxi engineer's voice sharp with panic. Torek was pounding on a sealed bulkhead, his scaled form trembling. The reptilian alien's crest was flared in pure distress. Torek, what happened? Kes, my son. He was sleeping in our quarters when the breach happened. The bulkhead sealed with him inside. The oxygen's venting. He's alone in there, Kira. He's only 4 seasons old. Kira's blood ran cold. She checked the environmental readout. Sector 7 was losing atmosphere fast. 8 minutes of breathable air left, maybe less for a child-sized Vraxi. The emergency response team? Trapped beyond the secondary breach. They can't reach this section for at least 15 minutes. Torek's claws scraped the metal. I can't, we Vraxi need high oxygen. Our metabolism runs too hot. I'm already dizzy. I tried to go in, but I collapsed. I can't breathe in there. Kira examined the bulkhead access panel. Through the porthole, she could see the small Vraxi child huddled in the corner of the darkened quarters, his chest heaving, his scales turning pale from oxygen deprivation. Kes doesn't understand, Torek said desperately. He's trying to breathe deeper, but that just uses the air faster, and he's terrified of the dark. The backup lights failed. Kira pulled up the environmental data. 6 minutes of air. The oxygen concentration was already at 14% and dropping. Lethal for the Vraxi's high metabolism physiology. I'll get him, Kira said. You can't. The air's too thin even for you. You'll pass out before you reach him. Kira was already checking her breather mask's reserve. Humans evolved in thin air. Our ancestors climbed mountains where the oxygen was half what it is at sea level. We learned to function on almost nothing. She sealed her mask, checked the tank, 12 minutes of air, and overrode the bulkhead lock. The key to surviving hypoxia was staying calm and moving efficiently. Kira kept her breathing slow and controlled as she entered the dimmed quarters. The thin air was immediately noticeable, like breathing at high altitude. Her body adjusted, her blood chemistry compensating the way her species had learned to do long ago. Kes, she called softly, her voice muffled by the mask. Kes, I'm here to help. The child's large eyes found her in the darkness. He whimpered, reaching out with trembling claws. Stay still, little one, Kira said, approaching carefully. She could feel the oxygen deprivation now, the slight dizziness, the heaviness in her limbs. For a Vraxi, this would be unconsciousness. For a human, it was uncomfortable but survivable. She reached Kes and immediately placed her breather mask over his snout. His breathing was rapid and shallow, panicked. Breathe slow, she instructed. Even though he couldn't understand without the translator, she demonstrated, taking slow breaths of the thin air, fighting the burn in her lungs. Kes's breathing gradually slowed as the oxygen from her mask revived him. His scales began to regain their color, but Kira was fading. Without the mask, she was breathing air that was now barely 12% oxygen. Her vision started to tunnel. She'd spent her reserve getting him stable. No, not yet. She lifted Kes, keeping the mask on his face, and turned toward the bulkhead. 20 meters. She could make 20 meters. Her legs felt like lead. Each breath was work now, her body screaming for oxygen that wasn't there. She trained for this in emergency drills. But training didn't capture the creeping panic as your vision darkened. 15 meters. Kes was making small sounds of worry, looking up at her face. Even through his fear, the child could tell something was wrong. 10 meters. Kira's knees buckled. She caught herself against a wall, never loosening her grip on Kes or the mask she held to his face. Her ancestors had climbed Everest, had survived in the thin air of the Himalayas for generations. She could do this. 5 meters. Her vision was graying at the edges. Her movements were automatic now, muscle memory carrying her forward when conscious thought began to slip. She slammed her fist against the bulkhead release. The door opened, and Torek was there, pulling his son from her arms. Other crew members caught Kira as she collapsed, pressing an oxygen mask to her face. The rush of air was like fire in her lungs. She gasped, coughed, her body desperately pulling in oxygen. "Breathe easy," the medic said. "You were at 8% oxygen. Another 30 seconds and you would have lost consciousness." Kira looked up to see Torek cradling Kes, both of them breathing heavily but alive. The child was crying now, the shock catching up to him, but his scales were bright green, healthy. "You gave him your air," Torek said, his voice filled with wonder. "The entire time. You walked through poison air to save him." "Not poison," Kira managed, her voice hoarse. "Just thin." A Sierwainan medic was scanning her with growing disbelief. "Your blood oxygen saturation dropped to 62%. That would kill most species. How are you conscious?" Kira smiled weakly. "Humans adapt. We evolved breathing whatever air we could find. Mountains, valleys, underground caves. Our bodies learned to work with less." Kes had crawled over to Kira, touching her face with his small claws, chirping softly. "He's saying thank you," Torek translated, tears in his reptilian eyes. "He wants to know why you're hurt." "I'm not hurt," Kira said, though her whole body ached from oxygen deprivation. "Just tired." Torek looked at her with something approaching awe. "We Vraxi are warriors. We're stronger, faster, built for combat. Our ancestors were apex predators. But we need oxygen-rich air to fuel our strength. You just walked through what would be our death without hesitation." Kira reached out to stroke Kes's crest, the child purring under her touch. Different environments, different adaptations. Humans aren't the strongest or the fastest, but we're stubborn. We learn to survive anywhere, on anything. Thin air, thick air. No air at all if we have to. The life support hummed back online. The atmospheric sensors showed oxygen levels rising back to normal. Kes made a happy chirp as he felt the change. "Your species amazes me," Torek said quietly. "You have no scales, no claws, no natural defenses. Yet when my son needed saving, you poisoned yourself without hesitation." Kira looked at Kes, who was now breathing easily, his eyes bright and curious. "He's a kid," she said simply. "That's all that matters." Later, in the medical bay, Kira watched Torek carry his son toward their temporary quarters. The child looked back and waved one small claw at her. Kira waved back, thinking about the generations of humans who had climbed higher, dived deeper, survived harsher conditions than they were built for, who had turned fragility into resilience. The galaxy had many strong species, many fierce predators. But humanity had learned something else. The stubborn refusal to let biology, physics, or common sense stop them when someone needed help. That, Kira thought as her lungs still ached, was its own kind of strength.